Hello, everybody. John Hayato Brandenhorst, Senior Strategist at Beatrax. I'm really excited today to have Brenda Millis, Principal of Creative Services and Visual Trends for Adobe Stock, chatting with us today to talk about the 2022 creative trends uh, that the Adobe Stock team has put out for the year. So, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself, Brenda?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Brenda Millis from Adobe Stock. I do lead, as John said, I lead all of the programs and initiatives that are based on trends, whether they're creative trends. We'll talk about the annual global creative trends, seasonal trends, demographic and industry trends for Adobe Stock. I also want to just let you know, before I came to Adobe, it really was kind of a perfect fit because I had been a photography and video director for a lot of brands across a lot of industries, for both print and digital media. And from the time I began my professional career, I was working with stock. So I was always searching for stock visuals I could use across so many brand types. So I worked in finance, technology, beauty, fitness, reportage, breaking news, conceptual. So I worked in so many industries that I had been that customer always looking for a range of visuals. And when I found out that Adobe was launching a stock collection, I was incredibly excited. And then even more so when they asked me to join, because I had always been in the role of the customer. And one of my strengths and passions professionally had been in always studying trends in visual culture, because we're all aware that we're living in a world that changes very quickly. And we also live in a world that's very visual. It's a very visual culture wherever you are, honestly. And so I'm delighted to be able to fill this role for Adobe and Adobe Creative Cloud, where we constantly study and present information about where the visual culture, the creative landscape is moving towards, to help both our contributors, our artists, plan for what kind of visuals to produce, as well as our clients to understand how to evolve their brand based on the creative forecast. And our annual creative trends forecast is particularly powerful because A, it's global in nature, and B, these are annual forecasts. So when we present our creative trend forecast, we're saying these trends are going to be building and become more and more powerful, mainstream, and relevant throughout the year. And that's one of the reasons why these trends are in fact so important for all creatives working on visual projects to be aware of. Yeah.
Got it, got it. And in terms of like kind of the trend background and
Yeah.
from when you started to maybe even today, right? Like the landscape of like where we're seeing visual trends, like maybe more so now is social media or
Yeah.
different kinds of digital aspects versus maybe originally it might have been more kind of offline billboards, things like that. Uh,
Absolutely.
can you tell me has your research how has that affected your research from the start to like where we are today?
Sure. Yeah, that's such a good question. I would say that you're right that as we're aware, the types of platforms, the places, the channels where everyone, consciously or unconsciously, is seeing pictures, whether still or motion, has expanded exponentially. It's actually one of the reasons why visual trends tend to evolve more quickly now, because as we know, but it should be said, that visual consumption and distribution is 24/7 everywhere we look. So that before we were always on our phones, we would walk down the street and see some billboards, or if you're like me living in New York, you'd see ads in the subway or really beautiful window displays in stores, for example. That remains. And yet now that we're in our homes, what used to be our private time, and we're ingesting and consuming images, clearly traditionally TV ads, sure, but now on our phones, on all the social platforms. That has just made image consumption and consumer visual engagement that much more all-encompassing. So yeah, my research has expanded, certainly. And again, because social media is all the time, that is one of the reasons that visual trends and consumer engagement is shifting and evolving more quickly than ever before, which actually makes trends research that much more important for any creative professionals, any companies to be following, so that they can consistently evolve their brand according to what their own company's messaging is, their own company's style, but also to ensure that they continue to engage their customers. Yeah.
Super interesting. Thank you. And these are global trends that you're talking about. Do you find that they are more relevant to specific regions? I know later we're going to talk a little bit about Japan, which
Yeah.
you've decided for 2022 to have a separate
Yes.
forecast. But yeah.
Yes, these are global trends. And so we vet these trends very thoroughly with our regional leads. Adobe is a global company. And so I work very closely with our regional leads with my findings before we finalize any of these trends and release them publicly. We get feedback, from EMEA, from APAC, LATAM. And the thing that's been so interesting, it's almost like the positive element or the silver lining in our couple of very challenging and uncertain years lately. The 2022 Creative Trend Forecast was the first forecast where I presented my trends to the regional leads, and they all said, "Yep, that's it. You got it." And that's because a lot of our lifestyles and experiences right now have become more similar across regions because of how the pandemic has shrunk or limited our lifestyles, and they've become more similar. And it was, I guess I should not have been as surprised as I was that I'm used to the region saying, well, I like these two trends, but these other trends, I'd like you to localize them a little bit, or maybe they aren't going to get as much engagement or importance for my region. But this in particular was just aligned globally. And it really is because of the long-term similarities from the pandemic. Yeah.
I actually didn't even consider that. That's super interesting.
Yeah. I had not either until I got the feedback. And then I ruminated and I thought, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. And we all agreed. Yeah.
So I guess you kind of answered how your team decides what the creative trends will be every year. I guess kind of on top of that question, though, you're doing all this research leading up to the following year.
Yes.
In terms of the process,
Yeah.
are you usually kind of deciding right like towards the last minute, or sometimes you're like, oh, right at the beginning, you kind of have a pretty good idea of a couple of them that will be continuing on or rising to the top?
Right. So it's methodology and timing, certainly. And it's a really critical question. So I usually do very, very, very loose research for the first half of the year. And once I hit the second half of the year, I start going very, very deep in my research. My research resources are many, as you can imagine. They're both internal. Adobe stock has a lot of proprietary information in terms of what are our customers searching for. We also have customer research requests, again, across all industries, and that's really important. It needs to be as important, again, for tech as it is for fashion or beauty or video gaming, media and entertainment, systems integration. So it really we have to see the industries aligning on these developing patterns. What kinds of pictures are everyone looking for? So I really do search internally for keywords, that start to show me patterns of topics. But I also do just as much, if not more, research outside. I do partner with the global forecasting company called WGSN. They've been really an important resource for me because they do have overall a global staff that is feeding reports to them across industries on a daily basis. So I start to take it, but I do also just do a lot of research on my own, whether we're talking breaking news, popular culture, generational studies, art, so just really, again, I go down a lot of rabbit holes, if you will. And I'm a pattern seeker. I look to see emerging patterns where I'm seeing specific types of visuals in a lot of places. And then I go to not just the regional leads, but I also go to just the Creative Cloud. So Adobe Stock is part of Adobe Creative Cloud, which is a huge variety of apps that creatives around the world use to create their creative projects. So I go to all the leads of all the Adobe Creative Cloud apps once I have findings, and I ask them to give me feedback in terms of those creative apps to see if they are also finding their customers scaling in those types. So I do I do a lot of cross-team checking and confirming, both in terms of Adobe Stock Global, but also in terms of the entire Adobe Creative Cloud. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of different resources and people to talk to.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, so in terms of timing, which I haven't answered, I'll start perhaps in towards the end of June. And then I really do hustle. I try to have all my findings by the end of September. And then I start all of the kind of cross-check, global and cross-team feedback, so that I can confirm that these findings are in fact very, very solid across all creative projects in all parts of the world. Yeah.
You're not prepared for this question, but I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
Is there a time when you just feel like, all right, now's the time, I just need to disconnect for a little bit, or you just kind of because you're always researching, like everything you do in life probably is part of research in essence, right? Like you go out for a walk, whatever you're seeing, it's like you're taking in kind of this information. Is there a time where you're just like, I'm going to go into the woods, I'm going to sit in a tent?
But I'll see things in the woods too. Because as we know, outdoor experiences are trending for good reason. But for me, I'm very lucky because while I do need to certainly disconnect from like official research, I do need to disconnect, and I get better and better about turning off my computer or turning off my phone. I absolutely do take time and take time to disconnect from being on a computer doing research, looking at articles, looking at reports, comparing information. But I am and always have been personally just interested in how our world works visually and putting those puzzle pieces together. So if I do go camping and start to think about how important it is to be in nature and have experiences outdoors, because outdoor experience is trending, that's a pleasure. But you're right in that I am pretty disciplined almost, or very aware of when I need to shut down online experience. Absolutely. Yeah. Because otherwise I would spend my whole life being on a computer instead of going into the world and experiencing the actual world.
That all makes sense. Awesome. All right. Glad to hear there's some balance.
There is.
Or at least,
some.
So, yeah. Well, during COVID, it's, I think for a lot of people, it's been hard, right? Like if you're
absolutely. Absolutely. And it changes all the time as things have moved from short-term to long-term. And also our lifestyle has been able to expand again in some ways and then shut down again. So just like life, it's just more extreme now. We're always rejiggering our balance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me too.
Okay. Next question's around the accuracy of the trend forecast, right? Actually, as I was saying it, I was thinking, I wonder how accurate 2020 was, to be honest, because nobody could have anticipated how our lives changed in 2020. And I
I have
did
to
not
think
have
about
I did
that.
not have a chance to go
That
back.
seems like so long ago right
It does, right?
now.
um,
I literally can't quite recall 2020. 2021 was super on target because I was actually quite nervous about creating a creative trends forecast for 2021 because so much of the work we saw, the commercial work we saw, and that's what I deal with, commercial work and commercial brand messaging in the world, in the real world. So much of it was the same. And so much of it was just cautious, like, we're here, we support you, let's get through this together. And I was very concerned as I was working in the summer through fall of 2020 to find a range of creative trends and brand messaging for the next year. But as happens in all in all research, once I did enough, I did see very, very, very distinct trends, and they were absolutely accurate. And all apologies, because I literally don't remember 2020. It was just so
no,
long ago.
I hear you.
But I will say, the time has changed for all of us. I will say that our trends have always been extremely on target, except for the fact that there are breaking news events that shift everything. So, for example, I've talked with my colleagues about this a lot. For 2022, one of the strongest trends, and it still is one of the strongest trends that just feels a bit tone deaf to me, and yet it remains an incredibly strong trend, is powerfully playful.
Yeah.
I don't feel, with the situation in the Ukraine, that broadcasting around content that's playful and distracting and whimsical yet optimistic, that helps us build resilience but also gives us a little relief. I feel uncomfortable about talking about, let's just create playful, optimistic, whimsical content. And yet I've had these discussions with my colleagues, yet they have confirmed that, yes, as odd as one might feel about broadcasting that is still the kind of content that a lot of consumers want right now. Things are so challenging, uncertain, and stressful in the world that people really do want to see lovely, inspiring, whimsical content and visuals, because it does, in fact, offer relief when we do so very much need it. So there's that funny thing where personally, I feel like at first I thought, was that off target? And yet this really is the kind of content that people are viewing and looking for and finding some well-needed, well-deserved relief from. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I mean, the whole idea of playful, even during the pandemic, right? Like, you need some positivity in your life.
Yeah.
You're not ignoring what's going on in the world,
Right.
but for us in the U.S., right? Like, there's certain ways to kind of look into things. But I agree, and I love that. I love that kind of that trend of powerfully playful.
It's just kind of ironic to be talking about playfulness in a time that is filled with so many challenges. And yet, again, the whole point of the trends is saying these are the kinds of visual and creative project types and visual types that people are responding to. So I think this is a good time to point out that a big part of my job in structuring and presenting creative trends is giving social and cultural context around them. So even though I might be talking about something filled with pets and fairies and animation, the reason why it's popular is because, in fact, people are finding it to be helpful.
Yeah. And a big part of the trends I see also align with mental health, right?
Yes.
So,
huge.
Trying to keep that as something that content that really helps us stay healthy in all those different ways.
Balanced, to find some balance. And thank you for bringing that up. That's such a good time to bring this up, that a major priority in the last few years. And this was growing before the pandemic, for sure. One of the things that the pandemic did was it really pushed to the forefront a lot of priorities and values that were already growing. But the pandemic effect was a huge driver in making these go from this is growing to this is absolutely top of mind around the world, back to this notion of the creative trends being very global in nature. And the importance, of course, of mental and emotional well-being being part of being a healthy person is absolutely at the top of the list for almost everyone I know. With everybody has a different situation, but we're all looking for ways to find and try to maintain mental health so that this whole optimistic realm of visuals actually helps us with that. As does, another of the trends is the centered self. And so, of course, visuals that we find calming and soothing are another way to have that very visceral and emotional experience that visuals do deliver. And that's the thing, visuals are very, very powerful. And they've only perhaps become more so in this time when a lot of us have had less in real time experience and connection with other people. So people have looked more and more to the power of visuals to bolster them up. And again, I had mentioned how important, outdoor images of outdoors are. Yep. And that's another thing. When people at the height of the early pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, were quite shut in, all of us, the popularity and the importance of outdoor experiences became so much more important. And that continues, as we actually have gotten to be able to go back outdoors.
Outdoors is, I learned new hobbies, outdoor hobbies, and I've always been an outdoor person, so definitely on point with that. Well, I think we're running out of time for this first round of global discussion around global trends, but I would say, is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that surprised you about the trends? Or because I know that in the next round, we're going to be talking a little bit about how global trends also aligned with some of the Japanese trends. There's definitely alignment I saw in terms of that, but different focuses, I think.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm always a bit surprised by the trends, and every year, people who work with me know this. Every year I start just thinking, how am I going to find this? Because it's nothing, as I move into it from the beginning, it's nothing that's particularly obvious to me, which just shows, for me, it shows the real need for these trend forecasts, because this is my job. I do this every day. And so if I start consciously doing research on trends and I am unaware of what I'm going to find, it just shows how much creative professionals need these trends forecasts. Because once I start doing the research, again, just like any creative project, at first you're like, how will I do this? I'm starting from scratch. But once you actually start to really dig down deep and wide, at a certain point, they start to present themselves to me. The patterns do start to present themselves to me, but I really have to do the work. And so me developing, confirming, and presenting these creative trends is very critical, because once I have hit a certain point, to me, I realize these really are mainstream. But just like anybody else, at first, I have no idea what I'll find, which is, it still surprises me every year that I seem so confused in the beginning. And yet, 3 months into deep dive research, I just feel like it's obvious, right? So I'm surprised every year. But as I mentioned, for this year, for the 2022 Creative Trends, I was surprised just how absolutely global in nature they were, because every other year I've had to definitely make changes and shifts and accommodations for each region.
Super interesting. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us about the global creative trends. Well, actually, where can people find these trends?
I think that on the blog,
Yep.
the Adobe blog, which is blog.adobe.com. And there's a section called, I believe it's Trends and Inspiration. And if you go to blog.adobe.com, you can actually just search in the search bar 2022 creative trends, and you'll find that in the Adobe blog. And there are so many other great and interesting reports and articles there. So they'd just be a fun place for all of the people joining today to explore. But yeah, just search 2022 creative trends.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brenda. I look forward to continuing this conversation to talk about the Japan-specific creative trends forecast. So,
great. Thanks.
thank you.